What would I do if I was starting a managed services provider today? It's the question that dominates my YouTube channel as my most popular content, and I get continual requests to update it. So today, we'll dive into that. Welcome to the Business of Tech Lounge, the live version of the Business of Tech podcast. It's Wednesday, July 17th, 2024, and I'm Dave Sobel. Now, I'm going to be taking questions and comments throughout the show, so make sure to put them in chat. There is a dedicated question section in the show for listener questions that have been submitted, but particularly with today's topic, I want to hear your comments and thoughts as we go. I want to thank Sales Builder, our Patreon sponsor, whose support makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. Reminder, I am watching the chat as we dive in. So our top story today, the thing I want to talk about the most, it's my most viewed content on the site. How would I start an MSP today? Now, I want to give you a little insight into how I prepare my editorials as some context. I spend a lot of time riffing, talking, and thinking about those ideas, and then ideally record them and tighten them up. And normally, I do all this work in private. I'll do them to a camera, I'll try a couple of versions, and I'll see what happens. But this one's been percolating long enough that I figured I'd go ahead and do a rougher version with you live, and it could be interactive for those that show up. And if you get this on the recording, put your comments in and we will discuss them. So you get the opportunity to do this together. Now, my biases. I'm a little less enamored of providers who are so focused on their toolkit and technical stack and selling you their prepackaged per user, per device, per month packages. Because bit of insight into the way I'm thinking now, besides being an analyst and a voice on the show, I'm also a customer. I run a media company and I use IT to do it. I think a lot about myself as a small business and the way that I might engage with an IT services provider in order to get some value. And I don't necessarily believe anymore that the pure monthly recurring revenue solution is the win that it might have been. In fact, as the industry has matured, I'm being proven right on this. One of the things that I thought about a lot recently is my conversation with Peter Kujawa. Now, Peter and I talked about the way profitability worked in business, and I want to remind you of a section of that discussion.
Well, if I'm an MSP, it's really important that I not only be doing projects, but that I be doing them in a way that's going to maximize my service gross margin. We did a whole section in last year's annual report, which you'll probably remember, that talked about the decline of project service gross margin and the impact it was having on overall service gross margin for MSPs. And so, yeah, definitely your main business model is managed services. So you've got to run a very efficient and effective managed service delivery operation. It's got to be priced right, et cetera. But don't lose sight of the other sources of revenue for your business. Make sure that you're doing projects really well. You're maximizing your gross margin there, that your product gross margin is not being overlooked. That's a significant source of profitability leakage for a lot of MSPs is they're underpricing their products. So you want to look at the totality of the business.
Totality of the business. That's doing a lot of heavy lifting there. And let's break that out, because what Peter's getting at is when you think about that sophisticated analysis he just did, he's assuming a managed services provider or IT services company that has a rich collection of revenue that they're working with. It's not just monthly recurring revenue. It's also project work. It's also transactional. Yes, you may have a good portion of your business be that strong monthly recurring revenue, but it's not everything. And oftentimes, too often when I'm talking particularly to smaller or less sophisticated MSPs, they're super focused on that. And it's clearly a failure point. Getting to a sizable business that has this mix of revenue is really important. And ultimately, the more I think about that, it's the other two bits that the customer really wants to think about. If I think about the core focus of IT services, it's about providing insight and advice to customers to better their business through technology. And remember, I'm not particularly enamored of cybersecurity when I think about that. Cybersecurity is built into delivering an effective technology stack, but it's not a lead thing. If I'm a small business owner, and I am, I'm not necessarily going out there and saying the thing today that I want to spend my money on is making my environment a little bit more secure. No, I want to spend $1 to get $1.25 back, or $1.50, or maybe $2 or $4 or $10 back on every bit that I spend. And I want to work with someone who's thinking that way too. Now, I want to use some of the buzz that we're thinking about right now as an example. Now, I recently had Paul Angioni on the show to talk about some of the feedback that he's getting from customers. Let's listen again to what Paul had to say.
There's certainly a lot of interest, and I think not a lot of kind of knowledge, right? And I think there are, at least from my experience, a lot of misconceptions about what AI is and what AI is not. And I think products that are branded as AI that are not. And so certainly, we're using AI tools to be more efficient and trying to help our customers make good decisions about how to leverage AI. But in my mind, it's still so new. And I think there's a lot of potential, and a lot of companies trying to sell things that aren't really AI, and aren't necessarily going to help them in the way they want it to.
Now, Paul's answer is exactly what I hear over and over and over again when I talk to solution providers. They're giving me the feedback of, yes, we have customers that are interested. There's a lot of buzz, particularly around AI, because that's what we're talking about now. And they're looking to me to help out with that, me being an IT services company. Now, that's the problem we really want to solve. How can we apply the new ideas, new innovations, and more importantly, drive to better business outcomes? Now, what I've said before, the last time I put together what I would do if I was building an MSP video, or if I was starting an IT services company today, thematically, I'm not necessarily going too far out. I'm building on what I presented before. I'm very interested in that productivity layer, right? I think that the difference here is making a difference around delivering value. How can you improve their business? How can you work in their production layer, the stuff that makes them money, their intellectual property? How can you work there, and how can you help them improve it? Can they get better business outcomes? Can they make more money? Can they save money on delivery? Can they expand into new areas? Can they deliver new technology ideas? Can they make their people more efficient? Can they get more work with the same number of people? Can they make their people a little bit more competitive? I think there's an area of doing all of that, and it's working in the productivity layer. I think that portion of the stuff that I've talked about prior is still very relevant. But there's something new here as well. And I want to break this out by highlighting from a recent interview with Yasser Ali. Now, he and I were talking about AI governance in the context of working with business. Again, let's pull from that and listen and talk more.
AI governance starts becoming a very relevant topic around what information classification do you have that is going into third-party tools at one point. On the other side, how the prompt is being used by the end user to get that information. When they ask a question, are we at risk of disclosing more than we should have? And what we have seen with ChatGPT prompt engineering, prompt attacks, that's not necessarily a safe bet that once you have a prompt, it's safe. There is a lot of hidden risks available, and it'll take some time for those to be resolved. But even without those, understanding what information, what people have access to from a business context or risk context or sensitivity context is a problem where data security and DLP is going to be forefront of any organizations looking to adopt AI.
Now that's the insight there, right? The idea that if we're going to talk about using these new technologies like an AI, that there's a lot of governance and there's a lot of potential risks there. And the new twist for me, the new development over what I'd said previously about starting an MSP is this idea of data management. I think too often providers talk about just data backup, and sophisticated ones talk about compliance. But the real frontier, it's data management. The idea here is that you really do have to spend some time working with customers and putting the data together in a way that makes sense. Make sure they're only collecting what's relevant, making sure they understand what they're collecting and why, not collecting too much data, and making sure that it's all managed and maintained in a proper and diligent way. Now, this is something that's really necessary, right? It helps with compliance. It also reduces your cyber risk. It's really good for liability and for privacy laws. By putting time in on data management, you're helping organizations with a lot of relevant needs right now. And it's a precursor for artificial intelligence anyway. You don't just need your data to be organized. You need to make sure you have the right data and not too much of it, and make sure that you understand what's in there so you can determine who gets access to what. So now where I think starting an MSP in 2024 really comes down to is it's not just about focusing on the productivity layer, but it's also understanding the data needs of the organization. And every organization has data needs. And I think these two work together in concert to make you really effective and deliver some real business value. If you think about automation and helping businesses with their business process automation, you not only have to have a good hold of the productivity layer, but you also have to make sure the data is there to empower them. You've got to make sure that you're presenting the right data for analysis to be done. If we're going to have any conversations about what artificial intelligence might do for a business, we have to make sure that we can extract good data from the organization anyway. Now, it doesn't necessarily have to be amazingly organized, but we do have to make sure that we understand what's there. And oftentimes businesses don't even know what data they have. So for me, data management is the new area. It's the area that I'm really focused on thinking about as the area we want to focus on. So if I were starting an MSP today, I would be focusing not just on the productivity layer, but also on data management and data governance, particularly as a precursor to helping them with artificial intelligence. And I would be leveraging a lot of the frameworks and organizational structures that are out there that are being published already. A lot of the large organizations have already put together these ideas about way you should be thinking about the ethics and frameworks of artificial intelligence. Even removing artificial intelligence itself, the frameworks are incredibly useful. And you can build an entire practice about working with customers to make sure that they are prepared for this. And you get value even if you don't layer in advanced stuff. And we know watching the market that there may be a lot of fake AI stuff that isn't necessarily what we're looking for. We can get real value now out of organizing, understanding, and being ready with the data that we have. And I think this is the area that if I was starting a new MSP today, that I would focus my time on. Now, I did this sort of live and riffed a little bit, and I would certainly love to hear from listeners. If you've got a comment, put it in chat if you're watching live, or put it in the comments below if you're watching the recording. It's an area that we certainly can talk about. But if you've got a question on something else, I'm also here to take for it. If you show up for one of my shows and bring your question live, you'll get a live response. Really do enjoy taking the questions and answering them. Of course, if you want to submit it ahead of time, you certainly can. And Q&A is a chance for you to get involved with the show. Now, I will be keeping an eye out for any last-minute questions. I haven't seen any yet, so instead, I'm going to give you a preview. Can you predict employee turnover by using AI? I spoke with Tyler Hochman, and now he's the CEO of 4 Enterprise, and he discussed their AI workforce analytics platform that predicts employee turnover before employees themselves are aware of their intentions to leave. Now, the technology uses a combination of external and internal data sources to make those predictions. Let me give you a preview of that interview. We're going to start with an overview of this because you've got a technology that's predicting employee turnover.
We take into account a variety of external and internal data sources in order to create an amalgamation of data that can then be used to predict both on an aggregate basis and an individual basis whether or not people will stay or leave in a business.
Okay, tell me what kind of data are you using to do the predictions?
We can predict externally, but if you couple that with internal data, and this is data that we're very cautious about privacy. So this is data that every employee knows is being collected, everything from your utilization to your schedule adherence, the basis of what forms your job performance. We can use that coupled with our external data to then determine your likelihood of staying or leaving at your business.
Now that's a preview. My Patreon supporters already have this video. If you're interested, and you can listen now by being a supporter on Patreon, patreon.com/MSP radio. It will drop for everybody on the weekend on YouTube and the podcast feed. So if you're interested, I encourage you to go listen. Now we have gotten a comment. I want to go ahead and talk about that a little bit. This listener feels you can predict and get an okay estimate for the numbers by using AI. I would agree with you. In fact, one of the things that I think is most interesting about this space of what we're able to do with some of the new incoming AI tools is do better data analysis. If you're a regular listener of the show, I've been reporting on a number of breakthroughs, particularly recently, about research into disease detection that is exactly this idea, that you can do predictions and get much better ideas of outcomes by applying AI. I am 100% with you on this idea. But a precursor to doing it well is exactly what I was talking about earlier, and it's around data preparation. And I think the vast majority of those audiences are not ready. In fact, for those that have not, it will come out today at 5 p.m. On today's show of the Business of Tech, I actually talk about how only 17% of enterprises have an enterprise-wide plan for AI. That's not necessarily a bad thing for those of us that are in the advice business, because it means there's a lot of customer looking. And just like you're right, saying you can predict and get good estimates for numbers with AI, in order to do it, you've got to get them ready from a data perspective. So I'm 100% with you, and it's why my thinking is going the way that it is. I'd love to hear from you. If you've got additional thoughts and comments, do go ahead and put them in chat. If you're watching the recording, put them in and I'll respond to them. Now, I do want to thank Sales Builder, who's our Patreon sponsor, who makes this show possible. Focus on your IT sales workflow with the power of automation and visit them at salesbuilder.com. That's BUILDR.com. And vendors, you too can get your name mentioned on the live show. It's a simple monthly subscription. Visit patreon.com/MSP radio for more. And listeners, the number one thing you can do to support the show is share it with a colleague. Like, share, and follow on your favorite platforms, but make sure to send it to somebody who you think gets a little bit of value out of it. And if you want to support us directly, you can visit our Patreon with our Give What You Want model. You set what the content is worth, and you get early access, including that interview that I just talked about. If you got a question and you're listening to the recording, send it in at question@mspradio.com. Really appreciate the discussion. I hope this has been valuable for you, and I'll continue to iterate on this idea. This one, with a little bit of comments, is going to end up being a full editorial. I look forward to the next conversation, and thanks for joining me on the Business of Tech Lounge. I will see you next time.